Everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and we are going to start off in part number 1, our playthrough of This War of Mine, the board game. If you haven't checked out my solo setup for this game, which will give you a much better understanding of how we got the game state to this current spot, and all the cards distributed along the game board here, you're going to want to check out the video I released a few days ago. I'll put a link to that in the top right hand corner. That setup video will really help you get an understanding of the first couple pages that are found inside of the journal. And for those of you that have already seen that, let's dive right into the playthrough with day number 1 in the morning with Bruno, Boris, and Emilia as they fight for survival. A new day begins. The very first thing we do at the beginning of a morning is to go ahead and draw and resolve the top card of the event deck, which is going to be a Chapter 1 cards. Let's go ahead and dive right into the narrative story. Chapter number 1. When the Civil War broke out, many people thought it would only last a couple of weeks. It's been a year since the military surrounded the rebels in the capital, cutting off all supply lanes. The civilians still trapped in the city suffer from hunger, disease, and the constant threat of shelling. It's another day of desperate waiting for the end of this terrible war. During the solo setup video, there was a time frame where we put the chapter objectives into a slot to the right of the event cards, and you'll remember I specified that we'll be coming back to this very soon in the playthrough because it's called upon by this card right here. We're going to build out the objectives that are going to be part of this particular challenge or campaign. So first off, it's a 3-chapter campaign, as it mentions right there in bold. Underneath of it, it gives you all the instructions you need to build out those objectives. You'll place the final objective on the very bottom. It'll be face down, and we're not going to look at that one. And then the other two, which are going to be randomly chosen from a number of different chapter objectives, are going to be placed face up on top of it. So we'll have 3 cards total, the top 2 facing up, and the last one facing down. So the final objective will be face down at the bottom of the deck. So now we're going to go ahead and reveal 2 chapter objective cards. They're going to be face up so you guys can see them as well. The very first one we draw that'll be face up is actually going to be chapter 2's objective, which will sit on top of the final objective. And the final objective is for chapter number 3. We won't know what that is until we get to it. And then after I draw the first card from here and we know it's chapter 2's, we'll draw another one at random, and that will be chapter 1's. That'll be the one we're going after first. So it's the second one that I'm more so concerned about right now. So let's go ahead and draw this card, see what we get. First one here is staying fit. So at the end of the chapter, all characters' hunger must be at 0. So this is really a timing type situation. We can be as hungry as we want all the way along, so much as to not be hungry enough to starve and perish. But at a certain point, at the end of the chapter itself, we need to make sure we have no hunger across our characters, and it's all of them, which is pretty brutal. If we don't, we have broken morale and we raise characters' misery by 2. If we do, we clear the mind and can immediately draw 2 narrative action cards and keep both of them. The great thing with that is narrative cards or narrative action cards are literally the only thing card-wise in the game that you can bank on to be a positive for you. So that is going to be chapter 2's objective. Now we need to find out what are we going to be going after for chapter 1. This is the one that matters. What's going to affect us right away? Water delivery for local thugs. It looks like we already owe the locals some water. So it says, at any moment, you may discard any amount of water without resolving its effects. For each discarded water, advance the objective marker, which we're going to use this marker right here, objective status, and it's going to go across this track to the very end. Once we do, we just simply leave it in that objective slot, and once the chapter resolves itself at the end of chapter 1, if we are successful, we get a payoff. And we can add 10 wood or components to storage. That is crazy huge. That would be a lot of ability to build. The penalty for not doing this, though, is we get raided and we have to discard 6 tokens and resources, starting with the most expensive. That could be really bad for us. So our first objective for chapter number 1 is set in stone. We got to deliver water to local thugs, 5 of them. That's going to be what we need to focus on. The chapter 1 card we just talked about that got this deck all set up is now fully resolved. We can take this card now and remove it from the game. Again, remove is a keyword in the game. Anytime that happens, you can actually throw it inside of a waste bag if you have the Kickstarter version, or honestly any kind of drawstring bag or anywhere you have a spot to throw them. Just keep them out of play. So that chapter 1 card's been fully resolved. The event's been fully resolved, which basically concludes our morning. The other thing that's removed from the game is all the other chapter objectives that you didn't use or pull when building out these objectives. So I have a hand currently right now of 5 of them, the chapter objectives left over. Those are also removed from play. In a moment, we'll be moving into the next phase called the day actions phase, but first I'd like to talk about movement in and around this house here, because we have certain actions we can do right out of the gate and other ones are actually blocked off in terms of movement in the house. So what you're seeing is a lot of cards in a lot of different spaces, but some of those areas don't have any cards whatsoever. So a place like this one right here with this red hand icon is a place you could go and take an action. Now that red hand icon is all over the place, really, on a bunch of cards, but what really matters in terms of knowing which ones you're actually able to use is really whether or not they're blocking you from getting there. So in other words, even though this space is available, and it truly is, I could have someone go here to search the kind of advanced fittings in order to find a new idea or think up something new that we could build. That sounds like a good idea. One thing I couldn't do is try to jump up here to this pile of rubble. There is a wall here and there's no way I can get up into that second floor. The only way to get up there is obviously a ladder. So you'd have to walk your way along here, and once you get to the end of a clear path, you then have decisions on either side of you. So I have a closed door to my left, a heap on my right, and rubble above me. I cannot interact with anything further along left or right in either of these paths until those are cleared out. And just to clarify, the game is not counting how many spaces you move, it's simply just ensuring that you follow what is most obvious in terms of open space to move through to get to a particular action. So logically, I can get to this closed door right here because I could actually walk through a bunch of empty spaces and go up the stairs. You don't have to worry about counting how many rooms you went through or anything along those lines. But if you really wanted to get to the rubble here, or more so the heap, you'd have to get through a closed door and then the rubble just to get to that heap. It's going to take quite a few actions to get there. These are the types of things you're going to need to think about right out of the gate in terms of what you want to interact with, because even though it looks like there's a lot to do at the beginning, you're a little bit capped in terms of where you can actually place your individuals. Another thing to be aware of is the fact the house actually goes below into the basement level, which is this level right here, but even goes all the way down to this second lower level down here where there's some furniture. So again, as the game goes on, you're going to be able to try to work your way down there to get those heaps and furniture piles, because anything in blue is going to give you a reward if you can actually get to it. It's typically chunks, pieces, components that you're going to use to build things. The rubble's there to just basically consume some time on your end to get past it. And of course you have things like bars, and it'll tell you right on it, in order to get through them, you need a saw blade. You cannot just sit there and yank on that door hoping to get through it. You need to get something that'll actually get you through it. Again, it's all very straightforward. It'll tell you right on the card what you need. A closed door, like you saw earlier on, needs a lockpick. Something else that's worth mentioning is the fact that this house is not sealed tight yet. You'll notice these particular icons around the house, there are holes where you have exposure to cold coming into your house. And yes, during a regular round, there's going to be certain events or circumstances where having these holes in your house are going to cause problems for you in terms of the heat. So you've got a hole right here, you've got a hole there, and you've got a hole way up there. These are the types of areas you're going to want to, over time, try and board up with tokens and wood in order to close and seal these off. That will help you in your fight against very cold nights that are yet to come. The cold space, which is way up here in the top left, is going to house cold tokens to represent how cold it really is getting. Every round of play inside this War of Mine, the board game, is considered a day. And as I mentioned earlier, we went through the morning phase, which saw us draw an event and get the objective cards set up. Every morning from here on in, we're simply just drawing event cards and fulfilling whatever they state. Some are eventually going to be subsequent chapters as well. Now we're going to move to the day actions phase. And inside of this phase, we're taking the characters that we have available to us, our survivors, and we're going to be moving them to different red hand icons around our house in order to try to get them to do something productive during their day to help us survive. So this was the major reason that I showed you guys in terms of moving to locations that have the red hand icon. There are some constraints. The closed doors, rubble, and the bars are certainly going to stop us from getting to the blue labeled cards that typically have good things behind them. Actually, they always have good things behind them in terms of resources, but you have to work to get to most of them. There's only one that's available right from the get-go, and that's the heap that's sitting right there. So it's one of the ones we'll probably dive after right away, and then we can go after the heap behind that one. So, what other actions can we potentially do during the day actions phase? We have open actions that are here all the time, things like the outside. Going outside is certainly an option and has some positives behind it. However, you're doing this during the day phase when all the snipers can see you a mile away. So by stepping outside of your safe guarded room that you're standing in currently, where we start the day actions phase, if we choose to go outside, the number of characters that are there, no matter how many, we're going to roll a black die, and if we land a 1, every character is going to be hit and take 2 wounds, which is pretty nasty. Then after that, we can draw and resolve a visitor card. In other words, someone's going to show up. It could be good, it could be bad, who really knows? But there's a lot of risk-reward gambling going on with that one for sure, but it's available to us if we want to try it. Now at the very, very bottom in smaller print says, if the number of characters in the group is 2 or less, we get to search the visitor deck, and instead of getting whatever we get right off the top of the deck, we look for a first arrival card. We go through the deck until we hit one, and once we do, the first arrival is going to give us the opportunity to bring someone into the house to potentially actually join us. In the top right-hand corner of the game board, we have a place a new fitting action spot, and here there's a deck right above it, the green trimmed one there, that says build a workshop. This is a deck full of cards. These are all fittings. These are things you can build, and right on the card on the top of it itself, it'll tell you not only what it is, but also the requirements to build it. This one's a mechanical part, 3 wood, 5 components. Then you have to ensure you have a space to actually put it, of course, not only the requirements of the components and the items and pieces that you need to make it, but also a space to put it that's empty. If you meet those 2 criteria, you can build it, you can slot it into your house somewhere, and you flip the card over once you do, and you're able to gain some benefits from it. Just be aware of the fact you're allowed to go through that deck at any time and just look through it. It's essentially almost ideas. Think of them as basically ideas that are in your head from the beginning of the game. Almost like you walked into this house and you realize, we really need a workshop, we really need a heater. Those type of things that are just simple ideas. The deck to the right of it is the ideas deck, and that's ideas beyond what you have access to at the start of the game. In order to get access to that particular deck, there's another space in the board you need to go to, and that's this space right here. If you choose to have a character land on this space, you can choose 2 cards from that ideas deck, which is the orange trimmed deck, and put them into the green fittings deck, basically allowing you access to build those things, again, as long as you actually have the resources to do it and a space to build it. So this is going to be useful a little bit later on, maybe not necessarily out of the gates, especially when we have a very low amount of components and wood and things we need to build some of these items. But again, you can freely go through these 2 decks to kind of get used to what kind of benefits you'll gain from them and what requirements you need to build them. It's all part of the strategy in how you're going to try and survive. The key takeaway is that you can never take an idea from the ideas deck and build it. It has to be inside the fittings deck to be allowed. And this last action that's always available to you is Poke About. Any number of characters can go here. It's really useful, and it really will help you out on those scavenging trips where you come back with your findings and you just don't have enough resources in terms of wood and components, and you want to take a gamble on rolling a 10-sided die to see whether or not you can rummage some stuff up from the basement. So it certainly will help you out in certain situations, but it also can be a big waste of an action if you happen to roll a 1 to a 4 and can only take 1 wood or 1 component. As part of the day phase, we always have to determine how many actions we actually have at our disposal. So first off, how is the day phase structured in terms of resolving actions? It's simply all three of our characters starting on the guard space, which is literally the front door of our house. I get to choose when playing solo where I'd like to put them, so I choose where I want to actually locate those individuals and what actions they're going to take. I don't resolve them, I'm just placing them where they need to be. And then, in whichever order I want, I resolve them. That is basically the first action, and once they're all resolved, all three characters, they go back to the guard space. And then we start the second stage of actions. So what's really important to note always before you go into this is what current statuses, really negative statuses you have on your character, because it's going to affect how many actual actions they get to perform. Very easy on the first day because everyone's the exact same. Completely ignore the two here on these statuses or conditions. Focus more so on the circles for hunger. You'll see two of them are white, one of them's black. If they were all white, so an example, I had a hunger 1, I would actually have 3 actions with this particular character. Sadly, I don't. I actually only have 2 because the black spot means I lose the third action. So currently I can only take the first and second stage of actions, and that's where it stops. Why this is important to mention now is because it's easy right now, but as the game goes on, you're going to obtain more conditions. So for instance, Bruno might become really miserable. And even though he's up to a level 3 misery, which is actually really bad, you can see still by actually checking this out in a column fashion, I still have 2 actions available for him. But as more statuses pile on over time, and if you're not managing them properly, you'll start to see that dwindle. The second you have a black circle in a column, that action is lost. So now I can only do the column worth that I have all white circles inside of, which is the first action. So I literally can only do 1 action with Bruno until he gets rid of some of his fatigue, and then he's back to 2. So you're probably curious as to what the number is on the right-hand side of these status conditions. It basically is the level of how bad that particular condition is affecting that current character. So as of right now, there is 4 levels. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4 in terms of the tokens. There can actually be a 0, and it's simply literally not having a status token. If it's 0, that's the best case scenario you can ask for because you don't have any condition whatsoever in that particular status. So of all of the statuses you can get, fatigue, hunger, misery, wounds, and illness, if you have none of them, you're doing the best you possibly can with that character, and you're getting all 3 of the actions. There are status conditions that'll come in at a 1 that still have 3 actions available to you, like hunger. So if I can knock my hunger down over time with my characters, then I can actually get back some actions. So that's really important, and you can use that strategy inside of the exact same day phase. So I could go into a day phase with this structure, and as long as I was able to find a way to get Boris or Emilia to eat some food that would knock back their level to a 1, I could gain access to that third action by doing it in the first or second action, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of strategy there. As I mentioned, the highest level you possibly can get on the status condition in terms of the number is a 4, which is not good. And when you hit a 4, you're going to get something that looks something like this. And when it states something like that, you can expect to find a very bad end for that particular character. It's going to tell you to go to the narrative in order to find a certain excerpt from it, read it, and determine what happens to that character. You're trying at all costs to avoid getting your characters up to a level 4 on any status conditions. It's also important to note that you check the special ability for the particular character that you're using because it might actually come in handy in a particular phase during the day. This one here says you may sacrifice one of Bruno's actions during the day phase to roll a black die. Result of 6 to 10, anywhere in between there or including those, add 1 vegetable to storage. The vegetables are very good. They're not going to necessarily decrease your hunger, but they won't allow it to go up either, which is great. Unfortunately, we need water, so water would have been a lot better there. The other individual that has a special ability is Emilia. Her states journal. At the beginning of the dawn phase, Emilia may raise her fatigue by any amount to lower her misery by the same amount. So she can basically become more tired in order to reduce her misery, which is actually quite nice because misery is pretty nasty. Now you'll notice Boris there on the left, being the red bordered character, does not have a special ability. That's because the red characters with the red border around them, they typically have stronger prowess and they also typically have a bigger inventory. So that's their advantages. us. So let's decide on our actions. For the first action at least, I'm going to have Bruno head over to this heap over here in order to try and search it. Hopefully we'll find some things that we need. I'm going to have Emilia head over to this closed door here, which requires a lockpick. So we'll place a lockpick from our storage there. And last but not least, I'm going to have Boris go through and up the ladder to the rubble space. In order to dig through this, I need either a shovel or 2 characters to be there. We do have a shovel, so I will place that right there. At this point, I can now resolve each of these as I choose. I'm going to go ahead and have Bruno explore the heap first and find out what we get. It appears we have found an electrical part, 1 water, that's good, and 3 components. So let's go ahead and add what we have gained after going through that heap. We found ourselves some water. This is perfect because we know we need 1 water per character. So now we have enough water for everybody. We also gained 3 components, which is awesome. It's going to help us with building things. Again, I have 5 of them now, so I could take 1 of these and remove 5 from this storage area, take 1 of them and put it in the storage times 5 area, but I still have a bunch of components to pull from the box, so I won't do it until we're running low on them. Plus, it's easier to count them up here on the playthrough. And the next thing I gained was an electrical part. So not bad all around for Bruno. He is going to return to the guard spot, and that card we just received and revealed is going to be removed from the game. Next we have Boris up here with a shovel, and he's going to go ahead and dig through some rubble. So first off, the shovel does not get discarded and does not break or anything along those lines when being used. And I'm going to take this rubble card, we're going to flip it over, and you know what the nasty thing about rubble is as you go through it with actions, there's still remnants left over. So I spent an entire action just breaking down the rubble, but there's still some rubble remnants to dig through later on. They're going to require a shovel or 2 characters, so that's all I get to resolve there. It just simply flips the card, and he goes back to the guard position. Emilia is last, but certainly not least. She's trying to open up a closed door. She needs a lockpick to do it. She now rolls a 10-sided die to see how well she does at lockpicking. We got ourselves a 4. What does a 4 give us? A 4 to a 10 is discarding of the lockpick, and then we get to resolve the back of the card. We literally just barely did it. Now, you'll notice the lockpick is discarded, so this is going to go back to the box. And we only have 1 use of that. Now, if we had a failed lockpick, we still get to keep it, and we could try it again later. It just basically burns actions on us, but we were successful just barely. So now we can go ahead with this closed door, flip it over, and look at that. We gained ourselves 1 component and 1 wood. So we'll go ahead and add additional wood there. We've got 5, and now in terms of components, we have quite a few going for us. That card has been fully resolved. We'll take the 10-sided die out of the equation. This card is removed from the game. It's now opened up a space for us to build here. Now we actually have 2 new spaces open, the closed door space and the heap space, to build things in with fittings later on. She goes back to the guard space, and that is going to do it for the first round of actions. So I'm going to go ahead now for second actions. Emilia is going to go this time to clear out the rubble up top, and she is going to bring the shovel with her to ensure that she can complete that. That's simply just going to be the removal of that card and the opening or availability to get to those closed doors, which will be nice eventually once we have another lockpick, of course, but I'm just clearing the way and opening up spaces. Next up, I'm going to go ahead with Bruno, and we're going to have Bruno go to the heap card, which is now available thanks to us clearing out the other heap card. So he's going to go all the way over here. And then last but not least, we're going to go ahead here with Boris, and he's going to go all the way up to the place a new fitting action as he's going to try to build something. So let's go ahead and resolve our second actions. I'm going to start it off here with Boris. And again, all of these characters are taking simultaneous action resolution, but I'm just resolving them one at a time. One thing to note though is you can't technically go down to the pokeboat area if you're dying to have some wooden components for an individual who's also planning to build in the same action and then use those components. You have to have the resources available to you to build a component prior to placing that individual there. So that is definitely something to make note of and is easily mistaken. So I'm going to go ahead here for placing a new fitting, and I'm going to have Boris go ahead and try to build it right here. When I say try, he's going to, because I know I have the resources to do it, and I need to have them in order to even even to put him in that space. So I'm going to resolve him first. I need 5 components and 3 wood spent to build this simple heater. We know the cold is coming, so we got to deal with it. So let's go ahead and pay 5 components, leaving us with 3. And we're going to take away 3 wood. The heater has now been built, and we simply flip the card over, and it will let us know that we now have an available action here. It says make a fire for each 2 wood or 2 books or 1 wood plus a book. Discard 1 cold token. This is going to come in handy for sure. Now, one thing to mention is that inside the new ideas deck that we don't have access to actually pull into our fittings deck until we use the new idea action space, there is a new idea that will give us an enhanced version of this simple heater that is more efficient. So if we find that we're burning a lot of books and a lot of wood and we want to try to keep our resource burning to a minimum, we can build a more efficient heater if that's something that we deem to be worthwhile. So our simple heater has been successfully built, and I'm going to bring Boris back to the guard position after resolving his action. Let's move on to Emilia and her clearing of the rubble. This one's really straightforward. Again, the shovel will go back to our storage. Emilia will go back to the guard position, and this particular card is simply removed from the game. All right, Bruno, I'm hoping for good things here. I really want to find some nice stuff here in the heap. I'll return Bruno back to the guard position. We're going to flip this card over, and we're going to cross our fingers that it ends up being something good for us. Oh, look at that. A weapon part, 1 sugar, 5 components, and 2 wood. That is a huge find. What's amazing about what just happened there is the fact that we spent 5 components and 3 wood to build a simple heater, and we almost got everything back for that. We got our 5 components back, so now we're right back up to 8 again, which is going to give us a lot of building options. We got 2 of the 3 wood that we spent on the simple heater back, so really that was a pretty awesome find inside the building. And on top of it, we also found some sugar, and even more importantly, we got ourselves a weapon part. Now, we can use a weapon part if we can build ourselves a workshop. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the workshop will allow us the ability to create something like a knife, something that we can use for defense. However, the downside at this particular point is we got all the things we need to go that route, but our actions are fully over. As the day actions phase comes to an end, I want to read a little narrative piece that I believe I missed mentioning when we began our actions. It says, "A new day begins. Outside is an ongoing conflict and sniper bullets are coming for us. We cannot leave the safety of our shelter, but there are improvements to be made. We should make this place feel more like home. We can use beds, a stove, or even a radio. But first, we'll need to clear some space. Hopefully, we might find something useful in this rubble." And that's exactly what I think we did during this first day actions phase. So now that this is closing out, let's head into the next phase. Dusk. The sun has disappeared beneath the horizon. Shadows and darkness now rule over the city. It is a bit safer to go out at this time, but first, we must regain some strength. The very first thing you do at dusk is you should have every character drink some water. We happened to find 1 additional water, which was the perfect amount to have each character have 1 water right now. The great news is if I spend 1 per character and remove them from storage, we're good for that requirement. If we do not, whichever characters don't drink 1 water, they have to roll a black 10-sided die. On a 1 to 5, their hunger goes up by 1, and on a 6 to 10, their misery goes up by 1. So neither of those are all that great, and hunger especially, if we get up to 3, that gets into dangerous territory where things could flip to a 4 quite quickly. The nasty thing, or the very tempting thing, is the fact that we have a main objective in chapter number 1 to deliver water to local thugs. So I could risk it and try to dump all 3 of these out the door to the local thugs and not drink water with any of my characters and see if we could survive. But I honestly don't think that's the greatest strategy because once you get some misery attached to you, it can basically compound pretty pretty fast, and we're pretty high on hunger, so I don't like either of those all that much at this point. So let's go ahead with all that said and drink 3 water. The next requirement during the dusk phase is to eat some food, and each character should eat 1 or more food, and you discard it from storage. So you're allowed to eat more than 1 if you want to. If your hunger's really high and you're trying to knock it way down, you definitely can. If you use canned food, you can lower your hunger by 2. That is the best form of food. Raw food lowers your hunger by 1, and vegetables keep your hunger at the same level. They just get you by barely, and they thematically don't fill you up. And then if you have no food, of course, your hunger increases. So I'm absolutely, at this point in time, being that I want to get back to 3 actions each, I'm going to consume all 3 of these raw foods, 1 for each character, so that we can actually flip their status tokens over to the hunger 1 side. Now this is much better. I mean, if I could have started the game off with 3 actions, I could have accomplished even more. But that's going to do it for dusk. Now we move into the evening. Evening has come, and we are now in the evening phase. Before nightfall, we must decide who will stay in the shelter to regain strength or guard the door, and who will venture into the ruined city. We can only hope to scavenge some food, meds, and other necessary materials. So what are our options during the evening phase? Well, we can have as many characters as we want sleep on the floor, which is the free option right here. We can place all our characters there if we want. That would lower their fatigue by 2. It's good, but it's not great. And right now, we don't have to worry about any fatigue, thankfully, because we don't have any, but later on we might have to use that spot. The other thing you can use, which is more efficient, is after you've built from the fittings deck a bed into one of these places, or spaces I should say, you can sleep a single character in a bed, and if you do, their fatigue goes to 0, which is even better, has a better night's sleep in general. Or you can place any number of individuals on guard duty. So you can actually have individuals trying to guard the front door of your house and stay up at night. Their fatigue actually goes up, of course, by 1 because they stay up all night long guarding the door, but they're also going to be the ones that have to deal with whatever happens during the night, which can be pretty rough. The other option is scavenging. So you can place up to 3 characters on the findings pile, which is that area in the top left-hand corner, and that's an area where you're sending them out at night so the snipers can't find them, or see them, better yet, and you get to pick a location and try to go to it and hope that things pan out well for you in terms of what you can scavenge and bring back. It's worth mentioning that scavenging will increase a character's fatigue by 1. Before deciding which characters should go out to scavenge, it's always good to look at the inventory levels in terms of how much weight they can carry. Very important, not all of the items you find in your findings pile as you scavenge are going to have a weight requirement, but some of them do. Like this one right here, sugar or electrical part. If I had found those while scavenging, they have a weight requirement of 1, meaning it's going to take up some weight to bring them back to the house, and my characters can only carry so much. So if I'm deciding what I want in terms of characters to go scavenging, I need to do a little bit of math in my head really quickly as to how much weight capacity I want to have. If I send all 3 of these out, or individuals out to scavenge, which is the maximum I can send is 3 characters, I'll have up to 12 weight I can carry back with me. That's actually really good. The downside is no one is guarding the front door, and that's going to have some serious repercussions that you'll see if I ever choose to do that. Additionally, if I choose to just say send 2 characters out the door, I could have a weight capacity of 9. That seems more reasonable, and maybe leave 1 person behind in order to guard the door. This is another reason why having the weapon part that we picked up earlier on is so key, because if I can build myself like a knife or something useful to protect and guard that front door with 1 character, that individual will be a little bit more prepared for any nastiness that might come his or her way. So let's go ahead and actually have Emilia head out and go scavenge, and she's going to obviously bring along Boris, because Boris has one of the best inventory capacities, plus his prowess is really good, so he's going to get some extra rerolls if he's out there and he's got some trouble coming his way. Because I'm choosing that Boris and Emilia head out for the night rather than getting any type of rest, their fatigue is going to go up. You can see the black dot there. It's going to impact their 3rd action. They'll no longer get it currently based on their layout. And Bruno is going to decide to stay right where he is in the guard position at the front door. And if he stays up all night guarding, he also takes a hit to the fatigue. So with our 2 characters on the findings pile, we move into the scavenging phase. It is safer to move around the city at night. Shots can still be heard, but only sporadically. You strap your backpacks on tightly and leave your shelter. Carefully, you pick your way through the ruined shops, houses that line the shelled streets. So currently I have 3 locations, starting with the closest location at 14 exploration cards that I would draw if I was to go to this location, being that it's closest, I can get there fastest, so I have more time to scavenge. It's the construction site. It has things like nothing if rolled 1 to 4, mechanical part 5 to 6, vegetable 7 to 9, shovel is 10. Now that's just the special findings you can find there, but you can also grab finding cards that have all kinds of other stuff too. That's just kind of the more so what you can expect to find there and hope to get. The quiet house above here has books, chems, herbal meds, vegetables, meds, and canned food. That sounds really good because it's got a lot of food in it and we now have no food. Food is huge and we want to keep control of our hunger, so that might be the ticket. The next one above is the military outpost. It has 2 weapon parts potentially there, broken pistols, a broken assault rifle, and a pistol. That is a lot of sweet items to get a hold of potentially. The first time you visit a location, think of it in terms of how long it takes to get to the location itself. If you ever revisit that location or have the ability to revisit it later and it's not in the same position and it actually gives you more cards because it's moved down the track, think of it thematically as you being more knowledgeable with the lay of the land, so that's why you have more time. So I've decided to head to the quiet house. I think food and water, things like that, are high importance to us right now, so let's head to the quiet house and see how it goes. In the top right hand section of the card, it states what types of things you may find there when going through the exploration deck. That is worth checking out because the next step of scavenging is determining what equipment you want to bring with you, and you might need certain equipment to get through certain things. So there is a closed door here, and we know closed doors use lockpicks. However, we've already burnt our lockpick, so that one might be a problem for us. There's also a basement entrance. That one doesn't seem to be too much of a problem, what we'll see. Down below, you'll see in the construction site, it mentions bars and rubble. And we know bars, you need a saw blade, and rubble, you need a shovel. Well, I have a shovel. If I was heading to the construction site, might be worthwhile to bring it. It does have a weight requirement that will knock me down 1 weight of what I can carry back, unless I choose to leave the shovel behind. But that's something you need to think about when choosing your equipment. And this includes weapons or anything else you want to bring with you when you head out scavenging. So right now I have very little, and I have nothing I want to trade because most of the stuff that I have is not really that great. I guess the only thing I could potentially bring, now that I think about it, would be the sugar. The sugar actually does take up 1 weight, so just because of that reason alone, I don't want to risk bringing sugar and have it just take up a spot just to take up a spot. So we'll leave it at that. No equipment coming with us, nothing to trade in case we find anybody. We'll just see how this pans out. The noise marker is set at 1, and now we get to prepare the bottom left hand corner of the deck with the unknown deck, and the exploration begins. So based on the number that's beside the location you've chosen, in this case it's a 12, I'm going to grab the exploration deck and I'm going to pull 12 cards off the top of the deck. And just like that, we've got our deck ready to go. We'll place this one back here. The deck that I just pulled 12 cards off of, this one right here, is going to go to the unknown section because we don't know what we're going to expect to find there. There's ironically a clock right on it, which symbolizes that time is burning as you move through here. And we use this exploration slot right here for any active residents that show up, any hiding places that might pop up, and any map cards that we might find. Let's go ahead and reveal the very first card and see what we find. Ah, look at that. Search the pantry. So it's at the very beginning. You may ignore this card, meaning we can take it and put it in the discard pile to the right of the exploration deck, or the unknown deck, I should say. Or we can search the pantry. It does have a private tag in the top left-hand corner. We can ignore this for now. There will be game elements that speak to this. Right now, it does not matter. So what do we want to do? Do we want to search the pantry? Yes, we do. The whole point of coming to the house was to try to find food. That sounds like a good idea. It says if we want to, return 2 exploration cards, which would be taking 2 cards from our time deck and putting them back in the exploration deck above, meaning that we're losing time, of course. Or we can raise the noise by 1 and roll for noise. I like gambling. No, I don't. But in this case, I do, because I'm so low on the noise chart, it's worth it to me not to burn time, but to just bump the noise up a little bit, make a little bit of noise as we go through the pantry, and hope no one hears us. So I'm going to go ahead and bump the noise marker up to 2. We're going to take the 10-sided die. We're going to roll it off. If we land a 2 or a 1, someone has heard us. We got a 10. See, I told you, we were perfectly fine all the way along. So we've now resolved the top section here. We can go to draw and resolve 1 card from the findings deck and look at the pantry chart. So we're going to go right to this deck right here and find out what's in there. Here we go. Let's see. The pantry has some sugar, cigarettes, and vegetables. Plus, we get to roll a black die, and that allows us to go to the special findings area of our location I talked about earlier, where there's numbers next to all the different possible items that could be there, and see what we get at random. So let's first go ahead and gather everything we got out of the pantry, put it in our findings pile, and then we'll roll that black 10-sided die. So the findings pile is starting to fill up, which is nice. We only have 1 in there so far that has a weight requirement. That's the sugar. Again, remember, we don't have to take everything we find back. We can leave things, and at the end of scavenging, we get to decide what we want to keep. For now, we just stockpile it all in that findings pile. Let's roll the black 10-sided die and see which of these special findings we gain. A 7 is another vegetable. That is fantastic. And the reason that's so good is we now have enough food for 2 of our characters for the next day to eat without having anything impacted in terms of their hunger. And our hunger right now allows us to have 3 actions, which is great. So now it's just more about mitigating our fatigue, but we still would like to find a little bit more food, would be great. So now that we've gone ahead and resolved these cards, this one's important to note. The findings card is shuffled back into the findings deck. This card that came from our timed deck right here, called the unknown deck, denoted underneath of this, is going to be discarded. We've gone through this, so it's going to go right here. So I'm going to shuffle that findings card back in, and then we can choose to continue exploring, or we can literally stop. And I'm going to continue exploring. All right, let's flip the next exploration card, see what we get. Oh, we found the rubble. There was rubble in the end here. So you can see sometimes these cards will appear, but wait, you need to read the very top of these cards. It says right here, check the current location card for rubble. If there is no rubble, discard this card. Remember when we checked the top right-hand corner of our location, it only mentioned a basement entrance and a closed door? That means a rubble actually does not appear at this location, so this card immediately goes to the discard. We don't get to interact with it. We continue on if we want to. Next card I got here says you may ignore this card or hide out. Return as many exploration cards from this deck right here as you wish and lower the noise by the same amount. If I had have gambled and put more noise into it, this might have been worth it. But at this point, I'm going to just let this one slide. So we're going to not do that. Continue onwards. Searching the furniture. This could be good. So we can ignore the card or search the furniture. If we choose to search it, we need to return 2 exploration cards to the regular exploration deck, or raise the noise by 1 and roll. Oh, should I risk it? Should I risk it? Should I go up to 3? 3 and a 10-sided die, it only has 3 chances of it actually happening. It's only 30%. I think that might be as high as I want to go on the risk there, but I think I'm going to do it. Now, I can tell you right now, I'm not always this risky, but as things go up, you never know. Sometimes this could be worth it to be able to continue to search and get a really big findings, but we could also encounter some nastiness right now, so let's see what happens. An 8. Oh, a little stressful rolling that, so we are good. We got ourselves an 8. Okay, so I can breathe a sigh of relief. We're safe for now, and because of that, we can now draw and resolve 1 card from the findings deck and look at the furniture chart. So what do we find from the furniture chart? There we go. We got ourselves a herb, a mechanical part, and a weapon part, plus a roll of the 10-sided die. Here's what our findings pile looks like now. We got a herb in there, a mechanical part, and a weapon part. Let's roll the d10. 4. What is that? A book. We got ourselves a book. We know books are really, really good for burning. And they're also usable with a chair in order to lower misery. We don't have a chair yet, but that could be useful. So this will go into the findings pile as well. The findings card was shuffled back into the deck. We discarded search the furniture, and we're going to continue exploring. Basement entrance. This is good. This is really good, except for the fact that if we want to enter, we have to raise the noise by 3 and roll. and we're already at 3. Oh no, this is where it comes back to haunt us. But the thing is, this particular location has a basement entrance. Is it worth the risk? That is really tough call. But you know what? I'm going to do it. Just kidding. I am not going to do this right now. It is a really bad idea. So basically we found the basement entrance. I don't have to interact with this one right now. You can see right here it says if there is a basement entrance, you may resolve this card immediately or place it on the exploration slot and resolve it later instead of drawing a new exploration card. So I'm going to go ahead and place this right here. And that's going to allow me to check it out later on when I can start to bring my noise level back down, hopefully. Let's go to the next card. Stairs down. Okay, this one says look for another way, return 3 exploration cards back, or enter it and raise the noise by 3 and roll. Nope, not doing that. I'd rather just grab 3 cards and put them back, essentially. So we're going to return 3 cards to the exploration deck, which is bad because you can see we're burning time here, but I want to be somewhat safe. Hiding place. Return, so we can ignore the card or return 2 exploration cards to place it on the exploration slot and use it anytime during the scavenging phase. After rolling for noise, you may discard this card to ignore an encounter, so don't have to draw a resonance card or perform a backstab. That's really good. Do I have 2 cards to use? Yes, I do. So if I go ahead and I was to discard these cards to put this card in the slot, the question is timing. Can I then interact with this card? It says you may resolve this card immediately or place it in the exploration slot and resolve it later instead of drawing a new... So yes, I could. So I could literally take these 2 cards, and it does state to return them back. So they go back to the main deck. They're not discarded. And this card now sits in my active area. I'm going to choose to actually go into the basement now. And I'm going to go ahead and bump up my noise by 3 and roll, and I can at least mitigate the noise. So the noise is going to jump from 3 all the way to 6. I'm certainly not the quiet type when I'm rummaging around the basement. We're going to go ahead and roll 10-sided die, see what happens. I got a 4. So yes, I would actually trigger the noise at this point, which would have me go to this residence deck. So whenever you trigger noise, you would go to the residence deck, the red deck right above here. But again, because I have hiding place, I can ignore an encounter, do not draw a residence card. So I'm going to go ahead right now and I'm going to use this card to stop having to resolve a residence card at all, which is great. So nobody shows up. I hid. They came downstairs, but they couldn't find me. And then after it says, after entering, add 5 cards from the exploration deck to the unknown deck. Also, you may discard this card during the scavenging to draw and resolve 2 finding cards instead of 1. That's fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead right now and just put 5 cards back into the unknown section. So just when you thought we ran out of time, we now have 5 cards back here and we can continue to explore. I'm really trying to find another scavenge chance so I can resolve 2 finding cards instead of 1. That would be huge. A door. Peek through the keyhole by returning 1 exploration card to look at the next card from the unknown deck, or enter, raise noise by 1, or just roll for noise. I don't really need to peek because I have some time, so I'm just going to go ahead and roll for noise. So we're going to grab the die. My noise level now is at a 1, so I should be safe. Famous last words. 5, I am, so I can pass through the door, no problem. I go through a door and I run into some bars. Now there are no bars denoted on the actual quiet house whatsoever, so this card simply just gets removed. And I shouldn't say remove, discarded. Remove cards leave the game completely. Here we go, we're poking about, so we can return 1 card or roll for noise. I'm going to roll for noise. That could be dicey, but again, I only have 1 chance to screw this up, so the odds are in my favor here. Thank you very much. That worked out well. That probably wouldn't have if it wasn't on camera. And Pokeabout says to choose 1 finding from the special findings chart for this location. So we have options like canned food, meds, vegetables, herbal meds, chems, and books. I'm going to take the canned food because that ensures that everyone in my camp now is going to be able to eat, plus someone's getting the extra benefit of being able to really resolve some of their hunger with the canned food. So that's a huge plus. Now the sad thing is the basement entrance card that I'm still hoping to use says I need to resolve for 2 finding cards instead of 1 when it asks for it, but I haven't been able to resolve a findings card yet. This said to choose 1 finding from the special findings chart, not to go to the findings deck. So I'm still waiting to use that, and I really hope time doesn't run out on me. Next card in the deck is hiding space again. Another one of those hiding spaces. So you may ignore the card or return 2 cards to place it. Again, I don't need to do this. I think I'm just going to straight up ignore it and just see what the last spot is. Stairs up. So we're not even going to be able to take advantage of the great double findings card from the basement that we went into because time is running out, and this only gives me an option to return 2 exploration cards I don't have or to enter it and raise the noise, which would not be a good thing. So I'm going to do what it says at the very bottom of the card, and most of these cards state end my exploration, and wrap it all up. So all these cards will go back into the exploration deck. So now I have to choose which findings I want to bring back, and this is simply just a game mechanism that allows you to play a little bit of what do I want to discard, what do I want to keep, what do I want to bring back, all based on my inventory weight. So canned food is 1, weapon part is weight of 1, mechanical part is 1, that's 3, sugar is 4. So I'm going to have no problem bringing all these back because my current actual weight limit is 9. What you can do with the rest of the weight that you can bring back and you don't use through findings tokens in this particular area is you can choose instead to actually bring back wood, components, and water. So literally during this moment you can add as many resources of wood, components, and water to the findings pile as you wish. Again, you have to be able to actually carry them in terms of total weight. They're considered resources. So I'm going to go ahead and actually decide not to bring back sugar as I don't have anything to use with it right now, and I already have a sugar at home already. That way I have 6 available weight to use, and I'm going to use it to bring back 6 water, which sounds like a ridiculous amount, but this is really going to help because I'll have 3 water for my individual characters when they need to drink, but also 3 to go towards the objective that I'm trying to meet. So now I've got everything I need inside my findings pile, and that's going to end scavenging. Now we move to the night raid phase. So during the night while we are out scavenging, we have to, at the shelter, deal with somebody that comes to the shelter to try to steal our belongings. We currently only have Bruno there right now, and he's completely unarmed. So hopefully it's not too bad. We're about to find out. Reality impact. It says something unexpected has happened. Draw a card from the colors deck to determine the color of the script. Then reveal the top card of the Night Raids deck and check the number with the color on it. Find the number in the book of scripts and resolve the corresponding text. Afterwards, shuffle this card back into this Night Raids deck. So we're going to go to the color deck now and determine which color for the narrative we're going after. The color deck is way over here, so I'll flip this card over. We got blue, and we're going to go ahead and shuffle this card back into the deck. So now that we know it's blue, we come back to the Night Raids deck as it depicts on the Reality Impact, flip it over, and take a look only at the very bottom of the card. We ignore everything else in the card and look down here for a number. It says 556. We're going to reference that script. Smoke. Lots of smoke, accompanied by the stench of burning rags. What bad luck! What thoughtlessness! Someone's cigarette butt has started a fire upstairs. Let's put it out quickly or we'll all suffocate. If there is a firefighter among the characters present, the fire is put out without problems. If there is no ex-firefighter among the characters present, roll the yellow combat die for each character on guard. Each character may use their prowess as well for rerolls. You may wake up the sleeping characters. You have to set the fatigue for each awakened character to 2. We don't have anybody sleeping though, so it's just Bruno. If we roll 4 knife icons in total, the fire's out, although we had to put in a lot of effort to do it. If we roll 3 or less knife icons in total, pick 2 crafted fitting cards to represent what has been burned. Discard these cards and place them back in the fittings deck. Uh-oh. So I just realized something extremely unfortunate. Now, while Bruno's running around trying to deal with this fire upstairs, the best result he can possibly get on this die is a 3. And honestly, anything 3 or lower is going to result in things being consumed by fire. There's nothing I can do about this. With my single roll that I always get to actually make this check, I can roll a 3. I have prowess, which allows me to re-roll it, but I can't add results to that. It's basically re-rolling it to try to get a better result. So I really would have needed to have one other character wake up from bed, whether they're sleeping on the floor or in an actual bed, or be in the guard space to try and help me by rolling an additional die to try to make this happen. Because I left Bruno all alone, and one of these two characters that went out scavenging, probably one of them that has an addiction maybe to cigarettes, which ironically Bruno is the one that needs to smoke cigarettes based on his card that I'm looking at. Maybe he was at fault in the first place, so it's his fault. This place is on fire. And the worst part about it is we spent that time to put the simple heater together. It's just been consumed by flames. The last piece of the night raid that occurs right now is what's called a crime wave. So right now, during setup, in the solo setup video, we put aside night raid cards and residence cards that had an exclamation mark in the top right hand corner, which was special and different and likely more painful than the regular residence and regular night raids. At this point in time, we need to shuffle 2 cards in any combination between the night raids deck and the residence deck here and put them into the respective decks. So 2 cards total. I could take 2 residents and shuffle them in, 2 night raids, shuffle them in, or 1 of each. I'm going to choose to keep the night raids under control and not have them turn into the nightmare, and maybe move 2 residents into the residence deck. And just like that, the residence deck has had 2 additional cards added into it, and the night raid is over. Now we move into the final phase of the day, the dawn phase. Another day of survival. We must not give up. So we've got Boris here as well as Emilia. They're coming back with all of the findings from the finding pile that we allocated earlier on. So we're going to bring all of those and put them into storage. And the 2 of them are going to go back to the guard position. Our characters have returned home and our storage area is stockpiled with some new goods. You'll remember earlier on in the video here, it said at any moment for water delivery to local thugs, you may discard any amount of water without resolving their effects. So in other words, you don't get any benefit from them. For each discarded water, advance the objective marker by 1. I currently have 6. I only need 3 to satisfy my individuals for the next day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 3 of them right now to bump up this objective status to the 3rd position. So it's going to shuffle all the way up to here. And then we're going to lose 3 water from our storage. Next, we have a chance to assign any meds or bandages prior to going to the fate card. And why that's important is because the fate card is going to determine whether those meds or bandages actually have any effect. Currently, I have no need because none of my individual characters are ill or wounded, so I have no reason to use them. Plus, I don't have any in storage to use anyway. I do have a herb, which could eventually be turned into a herbal med, which would be nice, but I don't have anything right now anyway and wouldn't want to use anything if I did. Next, we're going to go ahead and resolve the fate card and find out what happens. Raise wounds on all wounded, unbandaged characters by 1. So you can see right there, by not having bandages on wounded characters, things would get worse for them, but I don't have any wounds on any of them, so I'm good. Lower illness of all characters who took meds by 1. That's good if we had taken meds and needed it for illness. Again, we can jump past that. Then it says discard med tokens from all characters. We don't have any. Next step is if cold tokens minus the board ups, and they equal 4 or more, raise the illness of all characters by 1. Currently, as I mentioned earlier, we don't have any board ups on any of the holes inside of our current building, and we have no cold tokens, so we can skip right past that one. Next, it says to exchange the nearest small location, and if there is none, exchange the nearest medium location. The nearest starts down here, but this is a medium location, the construction site, so it's not this one that'll be exchanged. It's actually the quiet house, which is a small one, and that's the one we just happened to go to, so I'm glad we did when we had the chance. So at this point, what happens now is the military outpost now becomes a little bit more, we become a little bit more knowledgeable where this thing is located, so we have more location cards if we choose to go there. And we'll draw a brand new location to drop in here as well. We have the supermarket. That sounds like a pretty good one. Next on the fate card, it says to resolve any weight tokens and then discard them. Basically, we have no weight tokens right now, but there are certain fittings that would say, for instance, lay traps to potentially catch animals. So we would put tokens on those if we used an action to activate them and hope that something good happens. Usually it involves rolling a die, for instance. That's just one example, and we might find some food. So a weight token, we don't have any of those on the board currently. We might see them later on, so we can skip past that. The last thing we're going to do on this card is to resolve Spirit A on all the character cards, and this is a really interesting game mechanic. And this is going to change from fate card to fate card in terms of which of these triggers on the cards are going to activate. Sometimes they actually do a good thing, and other times they do a bad thing. So for Bruno here, a TV host who's a chef, his Spirit A says habit. Discard 1 cigarette from the storage or raise Bruno's misery by 1. Well, thank goodness we actually found a cigarette on our scavenging, so I can go ahead, I'll discard that cigarette in order to avoid misery for him. Boris says if Boris is fatigued, level 2 or 3, raise his misery up, so that's something you need to keep an eye on. Again, all of these spirits, A, B, and C, you really want to become familiar with them because just like the objective, they're just as important in mitigating how bad things can potentially get. Some of these are actually a plus though. Over here on the spirit side of things for Emilia, her habit is discarding 1 coffee from the storage or raising her misery by 1. We were not able to find any coffee, so unfortunately we will be raising her misery to a 1. And just like that, you can see the differences starting to crop up across their characters, which again, as I mentioned, are going to impact things when they come around to the day phase. Thankfully, Misery 1 doesn't impact any actions, but being tired certainly does. The fate card that we just fully resolved is now shuffled back inside the fate deck. Now we move along as part of the end of the dawn phase, and that is to draw 2 narrative actions. I've drawn 2, and this is what I've got. I got Vigilant Watch, play during the Night Raid phase, lower the damage or wounds from a single Night Raid card by 4 tokens or resources or wounds, or combination thereof. Still requires at least 1 character to be on guard duty. That's a really good one. Really good. The other one below it says Kick the Door Down, play during the Day Actions phase or during the Scavenging phase to automatically open up a closed door. We have some closed doors at the top of our shelter, 2 of them now that we cleared out some rubble. So that's also a really good one in terms of time saving on the actions. Really tough to decide which one, but I can tell you right now this one would certainly mitigate a lot of bad things from happening. This really gives us an advantage in terms of actions. I'm going to leave that decision up to you guys. We are only allowed to choose one of these and keep them. To end off the day, we have a little bit of narrative text here to read. It says, let us look back on the past day. How did we do? What will we need next? What must be scavenged or traded? What should be built? And let's see what tomorrow will bring us. Well, I can tell you right now, the first thing I definitely need to get back is my simple heater, thanks to Bruno dropping a cigarette and starting a massive fire inside of the shelter. And that's going to conclude this rules overview video along with day number 1. In this one, we went through at a much slower pace to get everyone accustomed to the game. For those of you that have played this war of mine, this may be more of a refresher than anything else. I'll let you know as we move into day number 2 and onwards, we're going to cut out a lot of the explanation of what's going on, and we're going to move into actions, actions, actions. So things are going to speed up exponentially. Another thing that I'm excited to introduce inside this playthrough is something that also came exclusive to the Kickstarter, so this is kind of an interesting twist into the playthrough, and that is this right here. It's the rubble die. So there is a mechanism built within the rubble die, and it's a very interesting one. It basically has sides that are spread between about a 4% chance to roll and a 22% chance to roll. At the end of scavenging, you can choose to risk it to roll the rubble die. Something good may happen or something terrible could happen, and in order to reference that, there's letters all over this die. It's a very interesting one, and you don't have to do it. And we could have done it in day number 1, but I decided to jump past it. But this is what the back looks like in terms of what those letters represent and what could potentially happen. So thank you guys so much for watching. Really hope to see you in part number 2. Let me know in the comments below, as well as a vote that I'll put up in the top right hand corner as to which of the narrative actions we should choose. Vigilant Watch or Kick the Door Down. Let me know in that vote in the top right hand corner. There's an eye. Click on that. You can go to the vote from there. Hope to see you in part number 2. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.